The war room aboard the Coalition flagship, Harmony's Edge, felt like a tomb. Red emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the faces of the galaxy's most powerful military leaders. Admiral Kethavar Salan's four massive arms shook as he held the datapad containing their latest defeat. His species, the Kethavar, had survived 10,000 years of galactic conflicts, but nothing had prepared them for this. "Another 3-star system's gone," Selene announced, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The holographic display showed vast swaths of red spreading across their territory like a disease. The Rigel sector fell in less than 6 hours. The Devourers consumed everything, planets, moons, even the asteroids. General Vorthak Grimm stood 8 feet tall, his reptilian scales shifting from green to dark brown, a sign of extreme stress among his people. His yellow eyes reflected the horror of what they all knew was coming. "My warriors have fought bravely, Admiral, but courage means nothing against this enemy. They move as one mind across 1,000,000 bodies." The Devourers were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They appeared 50 cycles ago from the dark space between galaxies, a swarm of organic ships that looked more grown than built. Each vessel pulsed with a sickly purple light, and they moved in perfect coordination, anticipating every coalition strategy before it could be executed. "Show them the Procyon engagement," Selene ordered. The hologram shifted to display a recent battle. Coalition forces had set up what should have been a perfect ambush, 3 fleets positioned in a triangle formation around a star system the Devourers wanted. The moment the enemy arrived, something impossible happened. Every single Devourer ship moved simultaneously, perfectly coordinated, as if controlled by a single consciousness. "They knew," whispered Commander Yexhai of the insectoid Vrix species, her compound eyes reflecting the display. "Before our ships even powered their weapons, the Devourers were already adapting their formation." "It's their hive mind," explained Dr. Quental, the Coalition's leading xenobiologist. His pale, elongated head bore the distinctive markings of the scholarly Altarian race. "Each ship contains millions of interconnected organisms. They share thoughts instantly across vast distances. When one learns something, they all know it immediately." General Grimm's claws scraped against the metal table. "We've tried everything. Surprise attacks, diversions, even sacrificing entire fleets to create openings. Nothing works. They adapt faster than we can plan." The room fell into desperate silence. 60% of their combined forces were gone. Entire worlds had been stripped bare, their populations consumed to fuel the Devourer war machine. At their current rate of expansion, the enemy would reach the Coalition core worlds within 20 cycles. That's when Ambassador Veltar of the Zenthari stepped forward. His species was made of living crystal, their bodies refracting light in beautiful patterns. But today his usual rainbow shimmer was dim and fractured, reflecting his inner turmoil. "There is one option," he said, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, "that we have not discussed." Every eye in the room turned to him. Admiral Selene leaned forward on his forearms. "Speak, Ambassador." Veltar's crystalline form seemed to grow smaller. "The quarantine zone, Sol 3, the humans. The temperature in the room seemed to drop." Several species took involuntary steps backward. The humans, the one race so dangerous that the entire galaxy had agreed to lock them away in their own star system. "You can't be serious," General Grimm hissed, his reptilian features twisting in disgust. "Those creatures are barely civilized. They wage war on their own species for resources they have in abundance. They fight each other over ideologies," added Commander Yexhai, her mandibles clicking nervously. "They create weapons capable of destroying their own planet, then build more of them." Dr. Quental pulled up historical files. "The last time humans were involved in galactic affairs, they ended a 3-way war by convincing all sides to fight a 4th enemy that didn't even exist. When the truth came out, they had somehow gained control of 2 star systems and 3 trade routes." "Exactly my point," Veltar said quietly. "Unpredictability, chaos. The Devourers can read our strategies because we think logically, honorably. We follow patterns they can predict. But humans—" He paused, his crystal body flickering. "Humans don't follow any pattern at all. The debate that followed was unlike anything in Coalition history. Some called it madness to unleash humanity on the galaxy again. Others argued that madness might be their only hope. They were quarantined for good reason, insisted Admiral Selene. Humans don't just fight wars, they transform them into something unrecognizable, which is exactly what we need, Veltar replied. The Devourers expect us to be predictable. Humans are anything but predictable. Hours passed. Arguments flew across the room in dozens of languages. Finally, with the weight of their species, survival pressing down on them, they voted. The decision was made. They would break the 50-year quarantine and ask for help from the one species that terrified them almost as much as the Devourers themselves. They were going to call the humans. Captain Lee Hyun was halfway through his third cup of coffee when the alarms started screaming. The Earth Defense Station Aegis shuddered around him as every system went to maximum alert. His small quarters, barely larger than a closet, were suddenly bathed in flashing red light. All hands to battle stations. The announcement echoed through the corridors. Unknown vessel approaching Earth orbit. Hyun grabbed his uniform jacket and sprinted toward the command center. The Aegis was humanity's first line of defense, a massive space station bristling with enough firepower to level a small moon. For 50 years it had watched the empty void, waiting for the day the galaxy might come calling again. "Report!" Hyun barked as he entered the command center. Lieutenant Kim Bora turned from her console, her face pale. "Sir, we've got a single vessel, alien design, broadcasting coalition diplomatic frequencies. The codes are ancient, haven't been used since the quarantine began. Coalition?" Commander Park Jina stepped up beside Hyun, her dark eyes narrowing. She was the station's second-in-command, a veteran who remembered the old days when humans still traveled among the stars. What could they possibly want after all this time? The main screen flickered to life, showing a sleek alien vessel unlike anything in their databases. It moved with an elegance that human ships had never possessed, its crystalline hull reflecting the light of Earth's sun in brilliant rainbow patterns. "They're requesting permission to dock," reported Ensign Choi Min-sik from the communications. Array. "They claim to have urgent business with Earth's military command." Hyun studied the alien ship. It was beautiful in a way that made human vessels look like crude metal boxes. But beauty could be deceiving. "Scan for weapons." "Minimal armament, sir," Bora confirmed. "It's more like a diplomatic yacht than a warship." "Could be a trick," Park Jina muttered. "Send them a message. They can stay where they are and communicate." From distance. Within minutes, the main conference room was filled with Earth's top military officers. The holographic projector hummed to life, and suddenly they were face to face with something none of them had ever seen before. Ambassador Veltar materialized as a towering figure of living crystal, his body refracting light in impossible ways. When he moved, rainbow patterns danced across his translucent skin. His face was almost human in shape, but the resemblance ended there. "Greetings, honored humans of Earth," Veltar began. His voice like musical notes played on crystal glasses. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zenthari Collective, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Coalition." The room fell dead silent. Several officers reached instinctively for weapons that weren't there. Commander Park Jina leaned forward in her chair, her voice ice-cold. "The same coalition that declared us too dangerous for civilized space? The one that locked us in our own star system like criminals?" Veltar's crystalline features seemed to dim. "The irony of our situation is not lost on us, Commander Park. We come to you in our darkest hour, fully aware of the complications our past decisions have created." "Complications?" Captain Hyun stepped forward. "You branded an entire species as galactic threats and cut us off from the rest of the universe. My grandfather died never seeing another star because of your complications. And yet," Veltar continued, "we find ourselves in desperate need of exactly the qualities that led to that decision." The holographic display shifted, showing images that made the humans gasp. Vast swarms of organic ships moved through space like living nightmares, planets stripped bare to their rocky cores, entire star systems consumed and left as empty voids. "The Devourers," Veltar explained. "They appeared from the space between galaxies 50 cycles ago. Every strategy we employ, they counter instantly. Every trap we set, they anticipate. They share a collective consciousness that makes our most advanced tactics obsolete. Lieutenant Kim Bo-Ra studied the tactical data streaming across her console. These coordination patterns, it's like fighting a single enemy with a million bodies. Precisely, Veltar nodded. They adapt to everything we do because they think as one mind. Logic, honor, conventional warfare, all useless against them. General Wang Dai-ho, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, spoke for the first time. What makes you think we can do any better? We're still using the same basic strategies everyone else uses. Veltar's crystal form seemed to brighten. No, General Wang, you are not. Humans are the only species we've encountered that fights without predictable patterns. You embrace chaos in ways that terrify us. You mean we're crazy? Park Jina said. Flatly. You are creative, Veltar replied diplomatically. The Keithvar fight with honor, the Vorthak fight with strength, the Zenthari fight with logic. But humans fight to win, regardless of how strange or unconventional the methods might be. Captain Hyun found himself studying the enemy formations. Something about their movement patterns reminded him of historical battles he'd studied at the academy. They move like Earth's ancient armies, he murmured. Disciplined, coordinated, but predictable. Our fleets are gone, Veltar continued, his voice growing desperate. 60% losses in the past cycle. At their current expansion rate, they will reach the Coalition core worlds within 20 cycles. Billions will die. The room fell silent as the humans processed this information. 50 years of isolation had made Earth strong and self-sufficient, but it had also left them disconnected from galactic affairs. Why should we care? Asked Colonel Nam Sung-ho, his arms crossed. You locked us away. Let the galaxy solve its own problems. Because, Veltar said quietly, when they finish with us, Earth will be next. The Devourers consume everything organic. They won't stop at Coalition borders. Captain Hyun stepped closer to the holographic display, studying the tactical readouts with growing interest. The alien formations were impressive, but they followed patterns, and patterns could be broken. I'll go, he announced suddenly. The room erupted in shocked voices. Captain, this is suicide, Park Jina protested. We don't even know if this isn't some elaborate trap. Hyun turned to face his fellow officers, a grim smile spreading across his face. Maybe it is suicide, but look at these formations, these movement patterns. They're fighting the way we used to fight before we learned better. What do you mean? General Wang asked. I mean, Hyun said, still studying the data. They've been fighting civilized opponents for 50 years. They've never faced humans in actual combat. They know our reputation, but they don't know what we're really capable of. He turned to Veltar. You said you quarantined us because we were unpredictable and dangerous. Well, Ambassador, maybe it's time the galaxy remembered exactly why they were afraid of us in the first place. The crystal being's form flickered with what might have been hope. You will help us? Captain Lee Hyun looked around the room at his fellow humans, seeing the mixture of fear, excitement, and determination in their eyes. They had been caged for 50 years, but they had never stopped being warriors. We'll remind everyone why humans don't know how to quit. The Defiance burst out of hyperspace like a bullet from a gun, its engines screaming as reality bent around the small human vessel. Captain Lee Hyun gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered from the violent transition. Through the bridge's pane viewport, he saw hell itself spread across the stars. The Kepler 442 system was dying. Massive coalition battleships, each one a work of art with flowing curves and gleaming hulls, were being torn apart by nightmarish creatures that looked like they'd crawled out of humanity's darkest dreams. The Devourer bioships writhed through, space-like cosmic serpents, their purple-black hulls pulsing with veins of sickly light. Dear God, whispered Lieutenant Park Min-jun from the weapons console. He was fresh out of the academy, and this was his first real combat. There must be thousands of them. Engineering Officer Kim Hae-won looked up from her readings, her face pale. Sir, I'm counting over 3,000 Devourer vessels. Coalition forces are down to maybe 200 ships. Hyun watched as an elegant Zenthari cruiser, its crystal, hull-reflecting starlight like a prism, suddenly cracked down the middle. The bioship attacking it seemed to dissolve the alien vessel from within, consuming it like acid eating through metal. Coalition Command, this is Captain Lee Hyun of Earth Defense Force, he broadcast across all frequencies. I'm taking tactical coordination of this engagement. The response came immediately, filled with panic and desperation. Human vessel, retreat immediately. This is Admiral Solane of the Coalition Fleet. You cannot engage these numbers. We've lost 60 ships in the last hour alone. Instead of retreating, Hyun turned to his weapons officer. Min-jun, load the kinetic kill vehicles, all of them. Sir? The young officer looked confused. Those are just tungsten rods with rocket boosters. Shouldn't we use our plasma cannons? Trust me, Hyun said, watching the Devourer formations on his tactical display. They moved in perfect coordination, like a school of predatory fish. Sometimes the oldest tricks are the best tricks. The Defiance had been equipped with humanity's most basic space weapon. Chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds. No fancy energy shields, no exotic particles, just good old-fashioned physics. Mass times velocity equals devastation. Fire. Hyun commanded. Dozens of tungsten rods shot out from the Defiance like invisible spears. The Devourer's psychic shields, designed to deflect the energy weapons used by civilized species, were completely useless against simple hunks of metal. Moving at near light speed, the results were spectacular. Bioships that had seemed indestructible suddenly exploded as tungsten rods punched through their hulls like paper. The Devourer formation, so perfectly coordinated moments before, suddenly scattered in confusion. "Impossible," came Admiral Solane's voice over the comm. "How did you penetrate their shields?" "Simple," Hyun replied, already preparing his next move. "We don't fight fair." Communications Officer Lee Soo-young looked up from her console. "Sir, I'm detecting massive psychic interference from the enemy hive mind. They're trying to coordinate a counterattack." "Perfect," Hyun grinned. "Give me access to our jamming array." What happened next would become legendary throughout the galaxy. Instead of using conventional communication jamming, Hyun broadcast. Something the Devourers had never encountered before. Pure chaos. Human music, radio shows, video game soundtracks, internet memes, and random conversations all mixed together and amplified across psychic frequencies. The effect on the hive mind was immediate and devastating. Creatures that had moved as one, consciousness for millions of years, suddenly found their thoughts filled with human rock music, comedy shows, and the sound of people arguing about sports. Their perfect coordination shattered like glass. "What are you doing to them?" Admiral Solane asked in amazement as Devourer ships began colliding with each other. "Giving them a taste of human culture," Hyun replied. "They're used to organized thoughts, logical patterns. We're feeding them chaos." But Hyun wasn't done. While the aliens fought with honor and precision, following ancient codes of warfare, he threw out every rule in the book. The Defiance began broadcasting false surrender, signals on coalition frequencies, luring Devourer ships into carefully planned ambushes. "Sir, that's against every military protocol," Lieutenant Park Min-jun protested. "Those protocols were written by civilized people," Hyun replied. "We're not feeling very civilized today." The human ship darted between the massive alien vessels like a minnow among whales, but a minnow with teeth. Instead of engaging the main Devourer battle line, Hyun targeted their support vessels. The bioships that were harvesting destroyed coalition vessels to feed the main fleet. Engineer Kim Hae-won shook her head in disbelief. "Captain, you're attacking their logistics network. No one attacks the supply ships during a battle." "No one civilized," Hyun corrected, "but we're going to starve them." The Defiance unleashed every dirty trick humanity had ever devised. Mines disguised as debris, false distress signals that led enemy ships into asteroid fields, even old-fashioned ramming attacks when ammunition ran low. Aboard the Coalition flagship, Harmony's Edge, General Vorthak Grimm watched the tactical display with growing amazement. "What is that human doing? He's not following any known battle doctrine." Admiral Solane's four arms gestured helplessly at the display. "He's making it up as he goes along. Look at this. He just convinced a group of Devourer ships to attack each other by broadcasting false hive mind signals. The tide of battle was turning. Devourer ships, so perfectly coordinated an hour ago, were now scattered and confused. Some were attacking empty space, their sensors fooled by human decoy drones. Others were fleeing in panic as their hive mind connection filled with the chaotic noise of human civilization. "Sir," Communications Officer Lee Soo-young reported, "Coalition ships are beginning to follow our lead. They're abandoning standard formation fighting." Through the viewport, Hyun could see elegant alien warships suddenly breaking formation and attacking from unexpected angles. The Zenthari cruisers were using their crystal hulls to reflect and confuse Devourer sensors. Vorthak battleships were ramming enemy vessels instead of engaging in honorable single combat. "They're learning," Hyun said with satisfaction. "Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to protect what matters." The largest Devourer bioship, a creature the size of a small moon, began to retreat toward the edge of the system. Its retreat triggered a cascade effect as smaller vessels followed, their hive mind connection still disrupted by the chaos of human culture flooding their consciousness. "Coalition forces, this is Captain Hyun," he broadcast. "Continue the pursuit, but stay unpredictable. Don't let them adapt to your tactics." As the Defiance led the counterattack, Admiral Solane's voice came over the comm, filled with a mixture of awe and terror. "Captain Hyun, what you've done here today, it goes against everything we consider civilized warfare." Hyun looked out at the retreating Devourer fleet, then at the rescued Coalition ships beginning to regroup. "Admiral, sometimes civilization is a luxury we can't afford. Today we fought like humans. Tomorrow maybe we can go back to being civilized." The battle for Kepler 442 was won, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had been reminded of something they had tried to forget for 50 years. Humans didn't just fight wars. They transformed them into something entirely different, something the enemy would never be prepared for. The Coalition training facility aboard the massive space station Unity's Hope had never seen anything like this before. Captain Lee Hyun stood before a room filled with the galaxy's finest military minds, species that had been fighting wars for thousands of years, and watched them struggle with concepts that human children learned in history class. "The enemy has superior numbers," Commander Kim Soo-jin explained to a group of crystalline Zenthari officers. Her voice was calm and professional, but Hyun could see the aliens' translucent bodies flickering with distress. "We have 40 ships. They have 400. Standard military doctrine says we should retreat and find better ground." The Zenthari officer, a being whose crystal structure reflected rainbow patterns when calm, was now pulsing an angry red. "Yes, obviously, no commander would waste lives in such odds. But what if those 40 ships can buy time for 40,000 civilians to evacuate?" Soo-jin continued. "What if losing those ships today means saving an entire planet tomorrow?" The room fell silent. The concept of acceptable casualties was so foreign to most Coalition species that they physically recoiled from it. The Zenthari lived for thousands of years. Every individual life was precious beyond measure. The Kethvar believed in the sacred nature of all existence. Even the warlike Vortak followed codes of honor that prevented unnecessary death. "This is barbaric," whispered a young Kethvar navigator, her forearms trembling. "You're talking about deliberately sending people to die." Hyun stepped forward. "We're talking about reality. Sometimes good people die so that better people can live. Sometimes heroes sacrifice themselves so that children can grow up. The universe isn't fair, and pretending it is gets everyone killed." In the station's main strategic planning room, the transformation was even more dramatic. Admiral Solane's 4 massive arms gestured frantically at the holographic display showing Devourer movements throughout the galaxy. His species had been military leaders for millennia, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for human, tactical thinking. "They're moving toward the Altair sector," reported General Vorthak Grimm, his reptilian scales shifting to a worried brown color. 3 million civilians on those worlds, minimal military protection. The traditional Coalition response would have been to send their fastest ships to evacuate as many people as possible, then make a stand at the most defensible position. But Hyun was studying the display with different eyes. "They want us to do exactly that," he said quietly. "Look at their formation. They're herding us toward Altair on purpose." Lieutenant Park Min-jun, who had stayed aboard the Defiance but was participating through hologram, pointed to a seemingly empty region of space. "Sir, what if we let them think we're taking the bait, but actually..." Exactly, Hyun nodded. Approvingly. We make them think we're being predictable, then hit them where they don't expect it. A young Vorthak officer named Karthak slammed his clawed fist on the table. This is dishonorable. You speak of deception, of tricks and lies. My people have fought with valor for 10,000 years. Hyun looked up from the tactical displays, his expression serious but not unkind. Officer Karthak, how many of your people are still alive after fighting with honor against the Devourers? The reptilian being's scales shifted to a deep, embarrassed purple. 40% casualties across all Vorthak fleets. And how many humans died at Kepler 442 using these dishonorable tactics? 12 wounded, none killed, Karthak admitted quietly. Honor doesn't protect the innocent, Hyun said firmly. Results do. When this war is over, we can go back to being honorable. Right now we need to be effective. The change didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. Coalition officers who had spent centuries following rigid military protocols began to think like humans. They started asking uncomfortable questions. What if we don't play by the rules? What if we make the enemy think we're doing one thing while actually doing another? What if winning ugly is better than losing beautifully? Commander Kim Soo-jin found herself teaching Zenthari crystal beings how to use their natural light-refracting abilities for deception instead of just communication. The Kethvar learned to use their four-armed coordination for confusing hand-to-hand combat rather than ceremonial displays. Even the proud Vorthak began incorporating human-style ambush tactics into their traditional charge formations. The real test came 3 weeks later, when the Devourers launched their massive counter-offensive. Intelligence reports showed over 10,000 bioships moving toward the Coalition core worlds in the largest assault yet attempted. Every prediction model said it would be a massacre. But the Coalition forces that met them were no longer the same military that had been losing for 50 cycles. The elegant formations and honorable tactics were gone, replaced by something chaotic and unpredictable. At the Battle of Proxima Gate, Zenthari cruisers used their crystal hulls to create false sensor readings, making the enemy think they were facing twice as many ships. Vorthak warriors abandoned their traditional frontal assaults and instead used hit-and-run tactics that left Devourer forces confused and scattered. The Kethvar, who had always believed in the sanctity of life, learned to make hard choices. When a single cruiser found itself surrounded by enemy bioships, Captain Yelnara didn't surrender or fight to the death. Instead, she rammed her ship into the largest Devourer vessel while broadcasting false retreat signals, making the enemy think the entire Coalition fleet was fleeing in panic. For the first time in their collective existence, the Devourers experienced something completely alien to their nature: uncertainty. Their hive mind, which had always been able to predict enemy movements based on logical patterns, found itself facing opponents who didn't follow any patterns at all. They're adapting faster than we anticipated, reported the Devourer consciousness, to itself across 1 million ships. These tactics are random, chaotic, inefficient, but inefficient or not, they were working. Coalition losses dropped from 60% to 20%, then to 10%. More importantly, they were starting to win battles instead of just surviving them. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Hyun watched the tactical reports with grim satisfaction. The galaxy was learning to fight like humans, and the Devourers were learning something they had never experienced before: fear. Sir, Communications Officer Lee Soo-young reported, "We're getting reports from across the front lines. Coalition forces are pushing the enemy back on 17 different sectors." Hyun nodded, but his expression remained serious. "Good, but this is just the beginning. The Devourers are smart. They'll adapt to our chaos eventually. We need to stay ahead of them." Commander Kim Soo-jin looked up from her tactical station. "What's our next move, Captain?" Hyun studied the galactic map, where red enemy positions were slowly being pushed back by blue Coalition forces. For the first time in 50 cycles, the tide was turning. "We teach them the most dangerous human tactic of all," he said quietly. "We teach them that sometimes, to save everything you love, you have to be willing to sacrifice everything you are." The galaxy was learning to fight like humans, and the Devourers were about to discover why that terrified everyone so much. The void between galaxies was a place where nothing should exist. No stars, no planets, no life, just empty darkness stretching for millions of light years. But here, in this cosmic wasteland, the Devourers had built their ultimate weapon, a command nexus the size of Earth's moon, pulsing with sickly purple veins that carried the thoughts of their entire species. Captain Lee Hyun stared at the monstrous thing through the viewport of the Defiance. After months of fighting, they had finally tracked down the source of the Devourer hive mind. The living moon rotated slowly in the darkness, its flesh-like surface covered in millions of bioships that moved like antibodies protecting a diseased organ. "Sir, I'm reading over 50,000 enemy vessels," reported Lieutenant Cho Min-ho from his fighter cockpit. The young pilot had aged years in the past few months, his boyish face now marked by the hard lines of a veteran warrior. "That's 10 times what we faced at Kepler 442. The human task force was pitifully small by comparison. The Defiance led a mixed fleet of only 200 ships, humans, Zenthari, Kethvar, and Vorthak vessels that had learned to fight like their Earth allies. Against 50,000 bioships and a command structure that controlled the destiny of trillions, it should have been suicide. But Captain Hyun had learned something during the war that even he hadn't fully understood before. Humans didn't calculate odds the same way other species did. Where aliens saw impossible mathematics, humans saw just another problem to solve. "All ships, this is Captain Hyun," he broadcast across all frequencies. His voice was calm, steady, carrying the weight of everything they had fought for. "Today we show them why Earth's children don't know how to quit." The response was immediate. Lieutenant Cho Min-ho's fighter squadron, barely 20 ships against thousands, dove straight into the enemy swarm without hesitation. Behind them, Engineer Yang Hee-young's voice crackled over the comm from the engine room of the Defiance. "Captain, we're pushing the reactors beyond safe limits," she reported. "If we maintain this power output, we'll burn out the containment systems within the hour." "Then we better finish this quickly," Hyun replied, watching his tactical display, as the first wave of coalition ships engaged the Devourer defense perimeter. What happened next became the stuff of legend throughout the galaxy. The small human fighter squadron didn't try to match the enemy's superior numbers or firepower. Instead, they did something that no sane military mind would attempt. They scattered in all directions, each pilot improvising their own attack pattern. Lieutenant Cho Min-ho spun his fighter between 2 massive bioships, using their own bulk to shield him from their weapons. When they tried to coordinate their fire, he was already gone, diving under a 3rd ship and launching his missiles at point blank range into its soft underbelly. "This is insane," came a panicked transmission from a Zenthari cruiser. "There's no pattern to their movements. How are we supposed to provide support?" "Don't provide support," Commander Kim Soo-jin replied from the Defiance's bridge. "Just survive and keep moving. Let chaos do the work." The Devourer forces, so perfectly coordinated through their hive mind, found themselves completely unable to adapt to the human fighting style. Every time they predicted where an Earthship would be, it was somewhere else entirely. Their collective consciousness, designed for logical warfare, began to fracture under the strain of tracking truly random opponents. But the real battle was yet to come. The command nexus itself began to pulse with angry light as millions of Devourer organisms realized their outer defenses were failing. Bioships the size of city blocks began emerging from the living moon's surface, each one carrying enough firepower to level a planet. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Lee Soo-young, "the Nexus is powering up some kind of superweapon. Energy readings are off the charts." Through the chaos of battle, Captain Hyun could see the truth. The Devourers weren't just trying to destroy his fleet. They were preparing to send a psychic pulse that would coordinate every bioship in the galaxy for a final devastating assault on coalition worlds. Billions would die within hours. That's when the Defiance took a direct hit from one of the massive bioships. The bridge shook violently as hull plating peeled away like paper. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as systems failed throughout the ship. "Hull breach on decks. 4 through 7, Engineer Yang Hee-young shouted over the alarms. "Main engines are failing. Weapons systems down to 30%. Commander Kim Soo-jin turned to her captain, her face pale but determined. "Sir, we need to fall back and regroup. The ship can't take much more of this." But Captain Hyun was staring at the command nexus with an expression his crew had never seen before. It was the look of a man who had just realized exactly what needed to be done and exactly what it would cost. "No," he said quietly. "We're not retreating." "Captain?" Kim Soo-jin asked, confused. Hyun turned to face his bridge crew, young men and women who had followed him into hell without question. "Set course for the command nexus, full speed." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of alarms and emergency systems. Everyone understood what he was suggesting. "Captain, that's suicide," Kim Soo-jin protested. "There has to be another way." Hyun looked at her with sad but steady eyes. "There is another way, Soo-jin. We could retreat, regroup, try again in a few months. Maybe we'd find a better plan. Maybe we'd develop new weapons, but by then how many more worlds would be consumed? How many more billions would die?" He turned back to the view screen, where the living moon pulsed with malevolent life. "This way is certain. This way ends it today." The Defiance limped toward the command nexus, its hull blazing with fires that engineer Yang Hee-young couldn't put out. Devourer bioships swarmed around them like angry insects. But the Coalition fleet had learned their lessons well. Zenthari cruisers used crystalline formations to confuse enemy sensors. Kethvar destroyers employed human-style ramming attacks. Vorthak battleships abandoned honor for effectiveness, striking at the enemy's weak points with surgical precision. "All remaining nuclear warheads to manual detonation," Hyun ordered. "On my command." "Sir," Yang Hee-young's voice came over the comm. "The containment breach in the engine room is spreading. We've got maybe 5 minutes before total reactor failure." "That's all we need," Hyun replied. The Defiance punched through the Nexus's final defense line, its dying engines carrying it toward the pulsing heart of the Devourer consciousness. Bioships tried to intercept, but Lieutenant Cho Min-ho and his surviving fighters threw themselves into suicide runs, buying precious seconds. "With their lives, Captain," Kim Soo-jin said quietly. "It's been an honor serving with you." "The honor was mine," Hyun replied. The ship struck the living surface of the command nexus, its nuclear arsenal detonating simultaneously with the reactor breach. The explosion lit up the void between galaxies like a newborn star, and the psychic scream that followed could be felt across 1,000,000 worlds. The Devourer hive mind, coordinated across space and time by the Nexus, shattered like glass. 50,000 bioships suddenly found themselves alone in their own minds for the first time in eons. The terror and confusion that followed was absolute. On every battlefront throughout the galaxy, Devourer forces simply stopped fighting. Some fled into deep space. Others self-destructed rather than face individual consciousness. The war that had consumed the galaxy for 50 cycles ended in a single moment of human sacrifice. Ambassador Veltar, monitoring the battle from a coalition command ship, transmitted humanity's complete tactical database to every world in the galaxy. As rescue ships pulled the few survivors from the wreckage of the final battle, he finally understood what made humans so terrifying. They didn't fight like soldiers following orders or warriors seeking glory. They fought like parents protecting their children, like lovers defending their beloved, like a species that viewed extinction as just another engineering problem to be solved through determination and sacrifice. The quarantine around Earth was lifted before the rescue operations were even complete. Humanity had earned their place among the stars, not despite their dangerous nature, but because when everything was on the line, that dangerous nature was exactly what the galaxy needed. And in the years that followed, when young beings throughout the galaxy heard stories of the war against the Devourers, they would always ask the same question: what made the humans so brave? The answer was always the same: they weren't brave. They were just too stubborn to quit. The end.